I don't know exactly when I started feeling it, that strange, creeping sensation that something wasn't right. It wasn't a sudden realization, not a dramatic moment where my world came crashing down in an instant. No, it was slower than that, like a single drop of water carving a crack in stone over time. Maybe it was the way Cheryl had started to pull away. Little things, at first. She used to text me during her night shifts, even if it was just a quick, "miss you," or a blurry selfie from the break room. Those messages had become less frequent over the past few weeks. Then, they stopped altogether. When I asked her about it, she shrugged and said she was just too busy. That made sense. She worked in the ER, after all. A busy hospital didn't wait for personal moments. But still, I felt something shift. The way she barely looked at me when she got home. The way she rushed to the shower the moment she walked in. The way she seemed distant. I told myself it was exhaustion. That she was just tired. That I was overthinking. Until that morning. She came through the door at 6:15 a.m., her hair pulled into a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. Normally, she'd lean into me when I kissed her cheek, but this time, she barely turned her face. Just a weak, forced smile. "I need a shower," she muttered, slipping past me. I watched her disappear down the hall, my stomach tightening. Something felt wrong. I don't know what made me glance at her shoes. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was just dumb luck. But when I did, a cold chill ran through me. They were clean. Too clean. Cheryl had been on her feet for 12 hours, at least, that's what I believed. But the white soles of her sneakers were spotless. No scuffs, no faint dirt streaks, nowhere from a long night in an overrun emergency room. I stared at them, my heartbeat picking up. That's when my eyes flicked to her bag. She had dropped it carelessly by the door, something she never did. Cheryl was always neat, always careful. She usually placed it on the kitchen counter, away from the floor. For the first time in our marriage, I hesitated. I had never been the type of husband to snoop. I respected her space, her privacy. But as I stood there, staring at the unzipped fabric, something inside me whispered, "Look." I swallowed hard. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I reached down and unzipped the bag. Inside, I expected to see her work essentials, scrubs, ID badge, maybe some gum or a protein bar. But instead, my fingers brushed against something soft. Lace. I pulled it out slowly, my breath catching. A pair of red lace underwear. My stomach twisted violently. Cheryl never wore anything like this to work. She barely wore lingerie at home. And definitely not under scrubs. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, my pulse thundering in my ears. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it was an old pair, something she had forgotten in her bag. But as I turned them over in my shaking hands, my heart dropped. The lace was brand new. The tag was still attached. A sickening realization settled in my chest like a lead weight. Then, I noticed something else. A folded piece of paper, tucked inside the side pocket of her bag. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out and unfolded it. My entire world tilted. A hotel receipt. Dated last night. 3:42 a.m. My breathing grew shallow. The room around me felt distant, blurred. Cheryl had told me she was at work. That she had been in the hospital all night. But she had been at a hotel. Why? I already knew the answer. I just wasn't ready to admit it. I stood there, gripping the hotel receipt so tightly that my fingers started to tremble. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else, the distant hum of the shower, the ticking of the kitchen clock, even the soft rustle of wine through the window. My mind kept trying to fight it, to twist the facts into something else, something less devastating. Maybe there was a logical explanation. Maybe Cheryl had a work-related reason to be there. Maybe it was a mistake, a mix-up. But no matter how hard I tried to reshape the truth, it kept snapping back like a rubber band, smacking me in the face with cold, brutal reality. She lied to me. She hadn't been at work all night. She had been at a hotel at 3:42 a.m. And judging by the brand new red lace underwear in her bag, she hadn't been there alone. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat, my hands clammy as I rubbed my thumb over the crinkled paper. My knees felt weak. A dull ache settled deep in my chest, spreading outward like poison. I wanted to confront her right then and there. To storm into the bathroom, yank open the shower door, and demand answers. I wanted her to look me in the eye and tell me the truth, or at least try to lie to my face, so I could watch her unravel. But I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, overwhelmed by a suffocating wave of disbelief, anger, and something worse, betrayal. For 7 years, I had built my life around this woman. We had dreams, plans, memories. And now, All of it felt like a cruel joke. The water in the bathroom shut off. I sucked in a sharp breath, my mind racing. My grip tightened around the receipt before I quickly shoved it back into her bag, along with the underwear. If I confronted her now, she'd deny everything. She'd twist it, gaslight me, turn it into my insecurity instead of her infidelity. I needed proof. Hard proof. Because once I said the words out loud, once I accused my wife of cheating, there was no going back. Cheryl emerged from the bathroom minutes later, wrapped in a towel, her damp hair cascading over her shoulders. She barely glanced at me as she walked past, heading straight for the bedroom. It was almost like she was avoiding my eyes. I forced myself to act normal, even as my inside screamed. "Rough night?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She hesitated for half a second. Just a flicker. Then she nodded, sighing. "Yeah, crazy busy. I barely had time to sit down." The lie rolled off her tongue so effortlessly that it made my stomach turn. I leaned against the counter, studying her carefully. I had never really looked for signs before. But now, with the weight of the hotel receipt burning a hole in my brain, I started noticing things. Her skin was flushed, not just from the shower, but more than usual. A faint, lingering scent of perfume clung to her, something sweeter than what she normally wore. And then there was the biggest giveaway. A faint bruise on her collarbone. My hands clenched into fists. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. She had no idea that I knew, and I wasn't about to let her catch on. So I played along. I smiled, pretended everything was fine, even kissed her forehead before she disappeared into the bedroom. My stomach churned at the thought, but I needed to be smart. I needed more. I needed to know who she was sneaking off to see, and I needed undeniable proof, something she couldn't talk her way out of. So, I did something I had never done before. I grabbed my phone, opened the GPS tracking app that we had installed on each other's devices years ago for safety reasons, and checked her location history. My breath caught in my throat. She had been to that same hotel multiple times over the last 3 months. Always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always on her night shifts. I shut my eyes, exhaling shakily. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a full-blown affair. And suddenly, the woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, felt like a stranger. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or the fact that I had been so blind to it. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't going to stay blind anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, my phone still in my hand, staring at the cold, hard truth glowing on the screen. The timeline didn't lie. Every night shift she claimed to work over the past 3 months, she had been at that hotel. My wife, the woman I trusted with everything, had been sneaking off in the dead of night, meeting someone else while I was home, sleeping alone, believing she was saving lives in the ER. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But instead, I forced myself to stay calm. I glanced down the hallway toward the bedroom, where Cheryl was probably getting dressed, oblivious to the fact that her world was about to change. I could have stormed in there, confronted her, demanded answers. But I already knew how that would go. She'd deny it, gaslight me, maybe even turn it around on me, saying I was paranoid, insecure, that I was imagining things, that it wasn't what it looked like. No, I needed proof. I wasn't just going to let her walk away from this with some rehearsed excuse. So, I made a plan. The first move. I spent the rest of the day pretending everything was normal. That was harder than I thought. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lie, the betrayal, the hotel receipt. Every touch felt fake. Every smile felt rehearsed. But I played along. That evening, she got ready for another night shift. I watched as she packed her bag, throwing in a spare set of scrubs. I watched as she pulled on those 2 clean sneakers and tied her hair back into a neat ponytail. She kissed me on the cheek, the same way she had probably kissed me before every lie she'd told in the last 3 months, and gave me that tired smile. "Try to get some rest," she said softly before walking out the door. The moment the door shut behind her, I sprang into action. I had already downloaded a call recording app on my phone earlier that day. Now, I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and slipped out the back door. I wasn't going to just suspect. I was going to know. Following her. My heart pounded as I drove. My headlights dimmed as I trailed her car at a safe distance. I had never done anything like this in my life. I never imagined I would have to. But here I was, following my own wife through the dark streets, my hands clenched around the steering wheel, my stomach twisted in knots. 15 minutes passed. She didn't drive toward the hospital. Instead, she took a familiar turn. The hotel. A punch to the gut would have hurt less. I pulled over a few blocks away and parked, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight that my knuckles went white. I watched as she parked her car, took a deep breath, and stepped out. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't looking around, nervous, like someone who was sneaking around. She was comfortable, like this was routine, like she belonged there. I clenched my jaw as I watched her disappear into the building. The moment of truth. I sat there for a long time, staring at the glowing hotel sign, my chest heaving. My wife, the woman I built my life with, was inside that hotel right now, with someone else. For the first time, I let myself feel it. The anger, the betrayal, the pure, gut-wrenching realization that this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't storm into the hotel. Not yet. I needed to know who. I opened my phone and scrolled through her social media. There had to be a clue. Her coworkers, mutual friends, anyone who had been liking her posts more often, commenting more than usual. Then, I saw a name. One that had appeared on her posts a little too much lately. Zane Harper. I clicked his profile. He worked at the hospital, but not as a doctor or nurse. Security. Tall. Athletic. A former military guy, judging by the photos of him in uniform. I scrolled down, my stomach churning as I found a picture from 2 weeks ago. A selfie of him in a hotel room. The same damn wallpaper I had seen on the receipt. My chest felt like it was being crushed. This was him. This was who she was sneaking off to see. I had all the proof I needed. Now, it was time to do something about it. I sat in my car, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers ached. The hotel loomed in front of me, a silent monument to betrayal, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. My wife was inside, with him. The man I had just found plastered all over her social media, hiding in plain sight. Zane Harper, security guard, former military, and, apparently, the man sleeping with my wife. A cold wave of nausea washed over me. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, trying to push down the rage clawing its way up my throat. I had spent the last 7 years believing in my marriage, in Cheryl, in us. And now, all of it felt like a lie. I felt like a fool. A blind, pathetic fool who had trusted too much, loved too deeply, and now had nothing to show for it, but a broken heart and a hotel receipt that proved I wasn't enough for her anymore. I couldn't just sit there. I needed to see it. I needed to know. I stepped out of the car, my body moving on autopilot. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I approached the hotel, my mind racing. What if I walked in and saw something I couldn't unsee? What if I lost control? What if? No. I pushed those thoughts aside. I wasn't here to make a scene. I wasn't here to fight some guy over a woman who clearly didn't respect me enough to be faithful. I was here for the truth. The lobby was quiet, the receptionist barely glancing up as I walked past. I moved toward the elevators, my hands shoved into my pockets to keep them from shaking. As I stepped inside, I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. Time for a little insurance. I started recording. A soft ding signaled the elevator's arrival at the top floor. The doors slid open, and I stepped into the dimly lit hallway, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My eyes scanned the room numbers, looking for the one on the receipt. 347. I walked slowly, deliberately, every step feeling heavier than the last. My mind was a war zone. One half of me praying this was all a misunderstanding, the other half knowing, deep down, that it wasn't. Then I saw it. Room 347. I stopped in front of the door, staring at the cheap brass numbers like they held all the answers to my crumbling marriage. Muffled voices leaked through the walls. A low, hushed conversation. A laugh, her laugh. Something inside me cracked. I had heard that laugh 1,000 times. In our kitchen, in our bed, in the little moments that made life feel complete. And now, she was sharing it with someone else. I lifted my hand to knock. My fingers hovered inches from the door. But then I stopped. No. If I knocked, they'd lie. They'd scramble for excuses, make up stories. She'd probably gaslight me, twist it, make me feel like I was the crazy one. I wasn't going to give her that chance. Instead, I pulled out my phone, angled the camera toward the small gap under the door, and hit record. The audio was crystal clear. Her voice. His voice. The unmistakable rustle of sheets. The giggles. The whispers. I had everything I needed. Undeniable proof. A hollow emptiness settled in my chest as I turned away, stuffing my phone back into my pocket. I walked back to the elevator, my feet heavy, my mind blank. This was it. There was no coming back from this. Cheryl wasn't just having an affair. She was comfortable in it, happy in it. The way she laughed, the way she spoke to him, it wasn't guilt-ridden. It wasn't hesitant. It was familiar. She had already moved on. She just hadn't bothered to tell me yet. I stepped into the elevator, staring at my reflection in the polished steel doors. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. I wasn't the husband she came home to anymore. I was just the fool she left behind. I drove home in silence, the weight of everything sinking deeper into my chest with every mile. The streetlights blurred past me, their yellow glow streaking across the windshield like ghosts in the night. I barely noticed the turns, barely registered the stoplights. My mind was too full, my stomach twisting in knots so tight I thought I might throw up. The audio recording played in my head on a loop. Cheryl's laugh, the playful teasing in her voice, the unmistakable rustling of sheets, the low, intimate murmur of words meant for someone else. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, jaw clenched so hard it ached. I had proof now, real proof, and yet, it didn't bring the satisfaction I thought it would. Instead, it felt like carrying a heavy stone in my gut, pressing down, crushing me with every breath. I wanted to rage. I wanted to break something, scream at the unfairness of it all. How many nights had I laid in bed alone, believing she was saving lives, when in reality, she was giving herself to someone else? How many mornings had I kissed her, told her I loved her, while she carried the taste of another man on her lips? The betrayal ran deeper than I could process. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at the dark house. This place used to feel like home. Now, it felt like a lie. Cheryl wasn't due back for hours. I had time. Time to think. Time to decide what came next. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, my mind racing. I had all the evidence I needed, but what was I going to do with it? Expose her? Confront her? File for divorce and let her deal with the consequences? The thought of a confrontation made my pulse spike. I wasn't afraid of her. I was afraid of what she'd say. What kind of lies she'd spin to justify this. Because she would lie. I had no doubt about that. I walked into the living room, my hands shaking as I set my phone down on the table. I needed clarity. I needed a plan. And then, as if the universe had a sick sense of humor, a notification popped up on my screen. Cheryl, love you. Can't wait to see you later, Red Heart. I stared at the message, bow rising in my throat. She was still playing her part. Still pretending. Still lying. A slow, cold anger settled over me. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to throw things. I was going to make her face the truth. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started gathering everything. Screenshots of the hotel receipts. Location history from her phone. The audio file. I compiled it all into a folder, labeling it The Truth. When I was done, I sat back, exhaling sharply. This wasn't just about proving she cheated. This was about making sure she couldn't gaslight me, couldn't manipulate the narrative. When she walked through that door, I wanted her to know she had nowhere to run. The confrontation. The hours dragged on, each minute stretching like an eternity. I didn't sleep. I didn't even lie down. I just sat there, waiting. At exactly 6:12 a.m., headlights flashed across the window. She was home. I heard the key in the lock, the quiet creak of the door as it opened. Cheryl stepped inside, dropping her bag by the door like she always did. She looked tired, but not in the way she should have been after a long shift. There was a looseness to her movements, a lightness that made my stomach churn. She had no idea. Hey, babe, she murmured, rubbing her neck as she walked toward me. You're up early. I just watched her, silent. She leaned in to kiss me, and for the first time in 7 years, I pulled away. Her brow furrowed. What's wrong? I took a slow breath. Steady. Controlled. Then I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. Press play, I said, my voice quiet but firm. She frowned, picking it up hesitantly. Her thumb hovered over the screen, and then the recording began. I didn't take my eyes off her as the sound of her own voice filled the air. The laugh. The sheets rustling. The intimate whispers. She froze. Her face drained of color. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, shakily, she set the phone down. What is this? She whispered. You tell me. Her lips parted like she was about to speak, but no words came out. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. I know where you were last night, Cheryl. I know where you've been for the past 3 months. I know about Zane. Her mouth snapped shut. Her hands trembled. I don't. My voice was sharper than I expected. Don't you dare lie to me again. She swallowed hard, looking away, her breathing uneven. For the first time, I saw something real in her expression. Not guilt, fear. She knew. She knew there was no way out of this. And yet, she still tried. Listen, she reached for my hand, but I pulled away again. It's not what you think. I let out a hollow laugh. Really? Because it sounds exactly like what I think. Tears welled in her eyes. The same tears she had used so many times to get her way, to soften situations, to make me believe she was the victim. But not this time. I stood up, towering over her, and crossed my arms. No more games, Cheryl. No more excuses. Just tell me the truth. She bit her lip, exhaling shakily. And then, finally, she broke. I didn't mean for it to happen. I felt something inside me snap. Don't. Just don't. I swear it wasn't. An accident? I scoffed. You accidentally booked a hotel room in the middle of the night? Accidentally went back to the same guy, over and over again. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I love you. The audacity. No, you don't, I said, my voice eerily calm. If you did, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied. You wouldn't have looked me in the eye every morning and told me you were working while you were. I stopped myself, my hands clenching into fists. I turned away, shaking my head. You don't love me, Cheryl. You love yourself. She let out a choked sob, but I didn't turn around. I had wasted enough time on her lies. And now, she wasn't my problem anymore. She stood there, her face streaked with tears, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something. Anything that might undo what had just happened. But there was no undoing it. No amount of tears could erase what I had heard, what I had seen, what I now knew. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of her betrayal sat between us like an immovable force, thick in the air, suffocating. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, sniffled, and then finally whispered, I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through my hair. That's the thing, Cheryl. You did. Over and over again. Every night you left for one of your shifts. Every morning you came home and kissed me like nothing happened. You weren't just lying to me. You were making a choice, every damn time. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no argument. No defense. She knew I was right. I exhaled sharply, trying to steady my breathing, trying to keep the rage that boiled under my skin from erupting. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Was it worth it? I asked, my voice low. Her breath hitched. What? All of this? Him. The lies. The sneaking around. Was it worth it? Her silence was my answer. I shook my head and turned away from her. My whole body felt exhausted, not just physically, but in a way that ran much deeper. 7 years. 7 damn years I had given to this woman. And in the end, it all amounted to this. The sound of her footsteps behind me was soft, hesitant. I never wanted it to be like this, she murmured. I scoffed. Yeah? Then what did you want, Cheryl? To keep living a double life? To have your fun with him and come home to me like nothing happened? Her lower lip trembled. I was confused. I spun around, eyes narrowing. Confused? You weren't confused when you booked that hotel. You weren't confused when you laughed with him, when you let him touch you. You knew exactly what you were doing. Tears streamed down her face now, her hands shaking at her sides. I didn't plan for this. I swear I didn't. Stop. My voice was sharp, final. I don't want to hear another damn word. You had months to tell me the truth. But you didn't. You made me look like a fool. And now you want to cry? Now you want to act like you care about how this ends. She inhaled shakily, but she didn't argue. She knew there was no coming back from this. I walked past her, heading for the bedroom. Pack your things. Her breath caught. What? You heard me. I turned to look at her, my face blank. Pack your things and get out. Her eyes widened in panic. Wait. Please, can we just talk about this? Maybe we can. There is no we. I cut in coldly. Not anymore. She took a step forward, reaching for my hand. I love you. I stared at her. For a second, I almost laughed. The audacity. I yanked my hand away and shook my head. No, you don't. You don't love me. You love what I gave you. You love the security of this marriage. But love? Real love? You don't cheat on someone you love. You don't lie to them every single day. You don't destroy them just so you can have your fun. A sob racked through her, but I didn't care anymore. The sympathy, the patience, the hope, It had all been burned away the moment I stood outside that hotel room and heard her voice through the door. She collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. I don't have anywhere to go. I laughed dryly. Go to him. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. No. Oh, what? Now you don't want him? Now you're scared. I shook my head, disgust curling in my stomach. You made your bed, Cheryl. Now go lie in it. She let out another shaky sob, but I was done. I walked into the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and tossed it onto the floor in front of her. You have 10 minutes. She stared at the bag like it was a grenade. You're serious. Dead serious. I crossed my arms. I'm not playing games. You don't live here anymore. Tears streamed down her face. Where am I supposed to go? Not my problem, I said, my voice ice cold. She sat there, unmoving, like she thought if she just cried long enough, I'd cave. I didn't. I walked past her, grabbed my car keys, and headed for the door. I'll be back in an hour. If you're still here when I get back, I'm calling the cops. She gasped. You wouldn't. I gave her one last look, my eyes empty. Try me. Then I walked out. And for the first time in months, I finally felt free. I drove aimlessly for an hour, my knuckles white against the steering wheel, my mind a battlefield of emotions I couldn't even begin to process. I wasn't just angry. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was something deeper, hollow. Like everything I had believed in, everything I had built with Cheryl, had been ripped away, leaving behind nothing but ashes. The worst part? The finality of it. There was no fixing this. No going back. No conversation, no apology, no pathetic excuse could ever erase the sound of her voice from that recording, the evidence that she had chosen him over and over again. And yet, a sick part of me still craved answers. Not for closure, there was no such thing in a situation like this, but because I wanted to understand why. Why had she done it? What had changed? What was missing from our marriage that had driven her into another man's arms? Or was it me? Had I been blind? Had I missed the signs? Had I been so caught up in my own love for her that I never realized she had stopped loving me? I pulled into a quiet parking lot and let my head fall against the steering wheel. The exhaustion hit me like a freight train, pressing down on my chest, suffocating. 7 years. 7 damn years. We had built a life together, created memories that I thought meant something. The inside jokes, the late-night conversations, the trips, the struggles we had overcome. I thought we were a team. But while I had been fighting for us, she had been planning her exit. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my emotions in check. I wasn't going to cry. I refused to give her that power. But I couldn't ignore the ache that had settled deep in my bones, the weight of everything pressing down, making it hard to breathe. I checked the time. An hour had passed. Good. It was time to go back. I turned the car around and headed home, my hands steady, my mind set. She had to be gone. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. No sign of her car. No lights on. I stepped inside, and for the first time in a long time, the place felt empty. It was strange how quickly a home could become just a house. The walls were the same, the furniture untouched, but the energy had shifted. It was like her absence had stripped the place of something intangible, or maybe it was just that I finally saw it for what it was. I walked into the living room. The duffel bag was gone. A few drawers had been left slightly open, a sign of her rushed packing. A note sat on the coffee table, folded neatly, her handwriting scrawled across the front. I didn't want to read it, but my hands moved before my brain could stop them. I'm sorry. I know that means nothing now, but I am. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I won't try to justify what I did. But please believe me when I say that I never stopped caring about you. I just got lost. I don't know who I am anymore. And I don't know how I let things get this bad. I wish I had told you the truth sooner. I wish a lot of things. But mostly, I wish I hadn't hurt you. I hope one day you'll be happy again. You deserve that. I let out a sharp laugh. She had no idea what I deserved. I crumpled the note in my fist and tossed it in the trash. I was done with her words, her lies, her excuses. For the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of clarity, a realization that I had spent so much time fighting for a woman who had never been fighting for me. And now? Now, I was finally free. But the road ahead? That was something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The first morning without her was eerily quiet. No sound of the shower running, no footsteps padding across the floor, no murmured good morning as she rushed to make coffee before heading to work. Just silence. For a moment, as I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers wrapped around a steaming cup of black coffee, I almost expected her to walk in like nothing had changed. But then I looked at the empty space across from me and reminded myself she was gone. And this time, it was permanent. A strange mix of emotions stirred inside me. There was anger, of course, anger at her for what she had done, for the lies, for the betrayal, for making me question everything I had once believed in. But beneath the bitterness and the heartbreak, there was something else. Relief. For months, I had been walking through life like a man in a fog, suffocating under the weight of a love that had already died. I had spent too much time fighting for something that no longer existed, a marriage that had been unraveling while I had been too blind to see it. But now, I had clarity. I had a choice. I could let this destroy me, let her actions define the rest of my life. Or I could take back my power. I could rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I wanted to move forward. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her betrayal become the thing that defined me. So I got up, grabbed my phone, and started making changes. First step, clearing out the past. I spent the entire day taking back my space. Everything that reminded me of her, the framed wedding photos, the little trinkets we had collected over the years, even the stupid coffee mug she always used, I packed it all away. Not because I was running from the memories, but because I refused to let them haunt me. I deep cleaned the house, opened the windows, let fresh air flood the space that had once felt so suffocating. I played music, loud and free, filling the emptiness with something that was mine. By the time the sun had set, the house didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like mine. Second step, rediscovering myself. For years, my identity had been wrapped up in being her husband, in building a life around her, in making sure she was happy. But what about me? What had I sacrificed? What had I given up for the sake of a relationship that, in the end, had only drained me? I pulled out an old notebook, one I hadn't touched in years. A list I had made before we were married. Things I had wanted to do, places I had wanted to go, goals I had let slip through my fingers. Somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of myself. It was time to change that. So, I started small. I booked a trip, a solo weekend getaway to a cabin up in the mountains. Just me, the quiet, and the chance to breathe. I signed up for a gym membership, not because I wanted to look better for someone else, but because I wanted to feel stronger for myself. And I reconnected with old friends, the ones I had drifted away from over the years. The ones I had always made excuses not to see because Cheryl and I had plans. They welcomed me back with open arms. No judgment, no awkward questions. Just genuine friendship. And for the first time in so damn long, I laughed. Real laughter. The kind that felt good, that wasn't forced, that wasn't hiding pain. Third step, letting go. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were still moments of doubt, of pain, of anger. Nights where I woke up expecting to feel her beside me, only to be hit with the reminder that she was gone. But with every passing day, it got easier. I realized that the woman I had loved no longer existed. Maybe she never truly had. Maybe I had been in love with the idea of her, with the version of her I had built up in my mind. And now? Now, I was free to find something real. But I wasn't in a rush. For once, I was content just being me. I wasn't broken. I wasn't some tragic victim. I wasn't the man she had left behind. I was the man who had survived. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy.